I don't like this. I don't want to be doing this. This is kind of like inconvenient for me, but this is my job now. And then it was funny because he was like, I hate this meal that she's making for me every day. So I remember when he finally was like, I really don't like that.
You know, and Christ warns us.
Wash your face.
When Christ talks about prayer,
book?
fasting, and almsgiving in the Gospel of Matthew, he makes a big deal about when you fast, it should be a private thing. In fact, externally, you should make an effort to make it not apparent that you're fasting from anything. You know, and why? Because the treasure that you're trying to achieve, you're trying to get by fasting, is a greater intimacy with God. This treasure in heaven, this virtue, and more intimacy with Jesus Christ. Well, hello and welcome back to Elevate Ordinary. I'm your host, JonMarc Grodi.
I'm Teresa Grodi.
And we're back with another extraordinary conversation about the ordinary pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. I need to clarify right now. When I say, because I always flinch when I say that, when I'm saying an extraordinary conversation, I'm not claiming that our talking is extraordinary, but that we're stepping out of the ordinary. It is extraordinary. We're stepping aside to look at some of the ordinary aspects of life that God is sending to us every day, with which he wants to make us saints that we often take for granted, and we are looking at them in a new way, in an extraordinary way. That's what I mean, so don't take it wrongly. Today we're talking about Exodus 90, which is decidedly not ordinary. I mean, it's a little ordinary in our household because I've done it like 5 years now. But it is extraordinary in this way, in that it takes a lot of normal things of life and turns them on their head. We're going to talk about that more in a moment, about how to do that as a couple, you know, or how to handle that as a couple when the husband's doing that. Before we get to that, as always, remind you that elevateordinary.com is where you can find out more information about the show and to get back into the archives, as well as information about our Patreon community, people who support this show and Awaken Catholic. Also download the app, the Awaken app at theawakenapp.io. Great place to follow this show and other shows on Awaken Catholic. A lot of other good stuff there for you. So check that out. Oh, I got myself out of breath with that intro. Talking too fast. Boy. Exodus 90. We're about halfway through this Exodus 90 this year. I'm doing it with some guys I met on Twitter, actually. And Exodus 90 is this neat program. This neat, I got their book there back when they used to have physical books. It is a 90-day program for men where they get together with a fraternity of guys. They fast, they pray, they read through the book of Exodus. They commit to they're working as a fraternity and discussing and holding each other accountable. They take cold showers in place of presumably normally warm showers as a way of growing, trying to grow in detachment from their attachments and
Was
to
this
prepare for
created
Easter.
by
Yes.
seminarians?
I think originally amongst some seminarians or for seminarians or by previous seminarians.
Yeah, that's
We'll have
maybe
James
I'm
Baxter
just
on here to tell us the full story.
creating some mythology that doesn't exist. But
Just
I
make
thought
up.
it was like seminarians who then were married and then were trying to
That could be it. Yeah.
help men.
It's a neat program. I really like it. I've done it for a number of years now with different groups of guys. Again, if the other guys listening to this, each one of mine has been a mixed bag of adherence. I always learn a whole lot about myself during it. I discover some new weakness that I really have to iron out and that I have to bring to the guys a lot. So we'll talk more about some of that. But I mean, the main focus of today, we were going to talk about it as a couple. You know, a lot of guys, I think Nick Del Torre here at Awaken Catholic is doing it. Kevin Jari, I think, maybe some other guys around. Other guy, Pete Range. I've been in a fraternity with him before.
Yeah, I think Pete and Rob are starting one with our priest.
I think they're doing the Lent 40. So that's
40,
coming up
gotcha.
soon. That's going to
Sorry,
start here in about 7 days.
I'm messing with my maternity clothes here on camera. Sorry, everybody.
So, but yeah, our thought was to talk about the dynamics of
because like as
yeah.
as a woman, when I bring this up to other people, other women, there's like a mixed bag. It's either like, well, I've actually never heard a woman say she loves that her husband does Exodus 90, but I have heard a lot of women say that like they hated it or it was such a stress on their marriage, and I haven't experienced that, so I thought we would talk through some of the. We put out there on social media like some particular issues, like what particular issues, if your husband has done Exodus 90, if you're doing it now, like what are some issues that you run into, and then we thought maybe we could just think through those. And so in Exodus 90, the men are meatless on Wednesdays and Fridays.
Yeah.
So it kind of starts like after the Epiphany, right?
Yeah, around that time.
Yeah,
it's 90 days
till
from
Easter.
Yeah.
So, so that was one, the extra burden that meal planning is, especially meatless meals. They're really hard to make, especially if you're paleo, and you're not eating a bunch of grains. But then another one was,
accountability and exceptions.
Yeah, like feast days, birthdays,
that's one
vacations. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, let's start with, I guess the place I want to start here is that one of the things that comes up quickly with this program, as with any program like this, is you realize quickly, oh, shoot, we weren't really on the same page. We didn't really talk ahead of time about this. I was kind of just doing my own thing. And now it's only after the fact that I'm kind of like cluing my wife in on what I'm doing. And that's just a general topic here that's important, that, it's so easy in married life to start out synchronized. We're working as a team, this family life, we're doing it together. We're talking about everything, but then you get busy and that starts to pull apart, and I'm working on my things and you're working on your things. Yeah.
Bouts of being together in sync, and then like kind of resting on your laurels, and then you kind of fall apart and you're living two separate lives.
Yeah, and then pretty soon, like you're doing your own things, you're signing up for things, or things are showing up in the mail, and you're like, wait, what are you doing with your side of the life? Like, I just had all these plans and things that I'm trying to do, and I haven't told you about any of them. And that's, again, sometimes it's just funny, but oftentimes it's like, no, this is a dysfunction. We gotta get back on track. I think sometimes I don't communicate because I know I'm being a little imprudent. I'm hasty. I'm jumping into things. I'm committing myself to things that even if they're good things to do, they bear more discussion ahead of time. And so too with Exodus 90, precisely because on the one hand, it is not to, the penitential aspects of it are not to be a penance for anyone else in your life. That's important. But also because even if you're doing a good job at not letting them become a penance for other people, they're still going to affect them. It's something that you should discuss with your spouse. And that's part of their program. They make a big deal in their introductory documents about, hey, how does this affect your spouse? How should you talk about it? How should you handle it? But, guys don't read things, or talk about things. And so this still tends to come up quite often.
So when we started talking about the food aspects, we noticed that both of us, it's so much easier to be severe on your own sex. Okay. Like both of us were blaming our sex for the problems with the food dysfunction. JonMarc was like, well, the man just needs
describe
to
the
eat.
food dysfunction.
Okay,
first,
so if you're eating meatless, or the husband's not eating between meals, or he's not eating desserts, or you're not having alcohol or something like that, it's just inevitable that there's going to be some kind of resentment, and for the person who's making the meals, right? For the person who sets the feasts and who sets the, plans the parties and all that stuff. And I think that is kind of normal. It's not insurmountable, but the little twinge of resentment is normal. But so, especially with the meatless days, I found that those are like the hardest for people who have talked, the women who have talked to me
Wednesday
about.
in particular, since that's the one that's out of the ordinary. Right?
Yeah.
Friday's a little bit more normal.
Yeah. So now it's funny because we didn't ever deal with this with Exodus 90, but we've dealt our entire marriage with like different diets. Okay. So, and particularly you on different diets, because I tend to be now like based on the cycles of pregnancy, how I eat and what I do. But when I'm cooking the meals, that's easy for me to do. But then when I forget that it's like a meatless day and I've made a meatless meal, or I've made a meat-filled meal. You have gotten into an awesome habit of always having some kind of like canned meat thing, because you do high protein. And so we can't just like have pasta, you can't just have a can of pasta that we throw on or something like that. So you've gotten really good at having like canned fish around that you like, smoked salmon or something that's in the fridge that you can grab easily. So we've kind of avoided that. But early on in our marriage, I remember at one point you told me that, and you're very sweet and very kind about it, but like I was making you something for lunch that you hated, and I was making it every day. I think it was like tuna salad sandwich or something like that. And I felt like, well, this is what I must do as a wife. I don't like this. I don't want to be doing this. This is kind of like inconvenient for me, but this is my job now. And then it was funny because he was like, I hate this meal that she's making for me every day. So I remember when he finally was like, you're like, I really don't like that. Can I just make my own lunch? And that's what you said. You didn't say like, can you make me something else even? It was like, can I just make my own lunch? And I was like, yeah, actually, sure. Yeah, I don't like doing this. And it just kind of like, that has kind of been how we've dealt with food discrepancies, where like you have always had a plan, or you don't get, I hate that phrase, I'm not going to use it. You don't get hurt over, like if I make something off that day, you kind of just like look around the cupboards and try to assume some other kind of protein into the meal, and that happens a lot where I don't know he's pulling back on carbs, and that may even just be a decision he's made that day. And so I'll make something carby for dinner and he'll just, kind of go.
Or have a smaller serving.
Yeah. So it's never really hurt me. Like I've never made something and been like, I worked so hard on this. So I can't identify with that. I'm sorry. So like when I'm talking about being severe on my sex, I'm just like, well, just don't get upset that he's not eating this food that you made for him. Don't make it purely for his pleasure. And I mean, that's good training for kids too, right? Because they're never going to like anything that you make, even if they liked it the last time you made it. So I'm just really used to now people being disappointed in my cooking.
And so on my side, like my thought was that the guy, again, it's very easy for guys to just like jump on a new plan, whether it's a diet or Exodus 90 or whatever it is. And just kind of run with it, and then only afterwards kind of think about, I probably should have talked to my wife about this, or when the non-meatless meal shows up, so talk ahead of time and ask, and make a plan and adapt and be
and
work together
everybody there. Be mindful of your reactions. You know what I mean? Like.
But yeah, that's the thing too. Is like, again, gentlemen, obviously, this seems pretty straightforward to me. But if it's a meatless Wednesday during an Exodus 90, and you've committed to that as a spiritual discipline, and the wrong meal shows up, suck it up and eat the meal. Just eat the food. Just make it a sacrifice. Just eat the food. Or there's many ways to make a meal penitential. Don't put salt on your food, or skip your favorite side, or whatever it is. Like you can still make a fast out of it to keep your thing. And then later you can maybe very gently say, that meal was delicious. Just as a reminder, if we could do meatless Wednesdays, that'd be great, or something like that. But the point is that like in the moment, you don't need to be making a principled stand. Like, you can be
me complaining, like if he were to very kindly like open up a can of tuna instead of eating the food that I
add this to the meal.
To be like, I hate Exodus 90. This is such an imposition to our family. Just be mindful of your reactions, like nobody's trying to hurt anyone else, so maybe I'm not
hopefully some of that was helpful. I mean, but the point is here, communicate ahead of time.
I'm not a good doula.
React well in the moment if things
I don't have a good bedside manner.
That's a big piece of all this too. And so when you make a plan, any sort of plan, but certainly a big, long, extended plan like Exodus 90 with a lot of its stipulations, its fasts, its asceticisms, its prayers, that you have to make that plan, but then you have to remain prudent in the moment.
Well, actually, so for the woman too. Okay, so I'm having a hard time identifying with this. But if you were in a position where you're like, why doesn't he eat my meals? I'm so frustrated with Exodus 90. I'm like, I made this for him. I really want him to enjoy this. Maybe ask yourself, like, what am I afraid of? Like what am I afraid of in this moment? Am I afraid that like I'm just a housewife now? Like all I do is stay at home and cook and clean, and nobody notices me and nobody cares, and they don't realize how much effort that's a real and valid concern. And that's not Exodus 90's fault. And that's not Meatless Wednesdays and Fridays fault, but it's actually something that you can address and you can talk about, and you can like voice your fears and talk about it. You know, if you're afraid, I'm never going to live up to his mother's cooking. I always feel like my cooking is subpar. And every time I go to her house, like her cooking is just amazing. And I just don't have that gene. Well, that's a legitimate fear, right? That's like something that you can address together, you know? Or am I afraid that I'm trying to be a really good housewife, and like, this is just knocking me down, you know? So again, housewife, my friend hates it when I say that word. I don't really get offended by it. I'm trying to be a good homemaker. I don't know what word to use in place of it.
Carrying on. Anyway.
Sorry. My husband has the watch on. I'm the babysitter.
The babysitter, yeah.
Okay, so we had a second thing we wanted to discuss. You got that, babe?
Okay, so another aspect of Exodus 90 stuff, or again, any plan. I mean, we can broaden this sort of topic on sort of like supporting each other as spouses when the spouse is like working on themselves, you know, working on their spiritual life or their physical health or whatever it happens to be. That oftentimes we can use each other as spouses to be the excuse to remain in a vice or an attachment. You know, and we do this, we've wrestled with this a lot. We've often joked on here on, you know, like we love to eat chicken wings and watch TV. And that's a habit we've been working on. Like we cut way down on that, especially during Exodus 90. Don't watch TV. You know, we still get chicken wings occasionally, you know, we're a little bit more moderate with them now. But the point is that, you know, there is a time to feast, there is a time to fast and eat normally, but at all times you're to be prudent and you're to be temperate. And, you know, as a couple, you can't be each other's spiritual director per se, and you can't be each other's accountability buddy per se. It doesn't quite work like that. But you should be trying to help each other, supporting each other in virtue and not being each other's excuse for vice. And so, you know, relevant to Exodus 90 is that like it's inevitable that there's going to be exceptions to Exodus 90. Like, you know, you've given up desserts, but it might be a kid's birthday. And so, you know, you have a special holy day for your family. And so you embrace the feast of that day and you have a piece of cake. Part of the point of having a fraternity in Exodus 90 is that really men should kind of turn outside their marriage for someone to be accountable to like, hey, you know, make sure I stick to this plan that I made. That really shouldn't be spouses necessarily. That can get a little dicey. I mean, you know, you have to discern.
Yeah, I actually remember a time when you were doing Exodus 90 where you said like, oh, I wish I could have ice cream, or I can't have ice cream because it's Exodus 90. And I said, well, spouses can make decisions for special nights.
Spousal exemption.
Well, but I was half serious, and I knew it was wrong, and you knew it was wrong. I mean, we didn't eat ice cream that night, but it was just like I could see how you could be like, I want this tonight, so we're gonna have it, and it doesn't matter.
It's good to have a spiritual director.
My wife
in this case, a group of guys where you can go to the guys and say, you know, like I have this plan, keep me accountable to it, but also, hey, I need to make this exemption to it. You know, I think this is prudent. What do you think? That kind of a deal. Yeah,
and the issue that it's not supposed to be a penance to other people, something that I've really been blindsided about. You know, like I've always been really excited for our kids, our theoretical kids, when I was excited about this, to see us fasting and see us doing hard things and see us doing, you know, like difficult things. But they're like really emotionally wrought when like daddy doesn't have a piece of cake, or like when is daddy eating this morning?
Very offended about it.
I mean, they're very concerned about it. And for a long time I was just like, no, they need to learn to suck it up. But then I'm like, no, maybe we need to look at this in a different way. And if there's a birthday, we haven't had a birthday fall yet in Exodus 90. But if we've had feast days fall, and St. Patrick's Day is like my kids' green crepes or everything.
We have a special tradition.
You know, we have a special tradition for that.
So I always, every year at Exodus 90, I always tell guys ahead of the time that, hey, this is what our family does that day. We have special green dessert crepes that morning, and we put up decorations and stuff. And so I'm going to do that I'm not going to go overboard, but I'm going to have, our family treat that day because it's a tradition for us.
Yeah, because we're not trying to force our kids to be penitential on their feast day that they look for, the family tradition that we've cultivated, by watching Daddy not eat a grape. I mean, they really do. They really get like super emotional. It takes me off guard. So yeah, it's not to be a penance for the children either.
In any fast, any penance, whether it's just your Lenten penance or Friday abstinence from meat or whatever, you never want to make a big deal about it. Christ warns us.
Wash your face.
When Christ talks about prayer,
Wash
fasting, and almsgiving in the Gospel of Matthew, he makes a big deal about when you fast, it should be a private thing. In fact, externally, you should make an effort to make it not apparent that you're fasting from anything. And why? Because the treasure that you're trying to achieve, you're trying to get by fasting, is a greater intimacy with God. This treasure in heaven, this virtue and more intimacy with Jesus Christ. If you are introducing though this element of people seeing what I'm doing and I'm putting on a show for them, you're introducing a mixed motive into why you're doing that.
It's like when you feel tempted to pray for the benefit of the other people in front of you, like extemporaneous prayer.
Yes.
Rather than like you're praying to God. That's really hard when you have kids because you're like, I want to say the right things so that they get the right idea. But then you're like, who am I praying to, my kids or to God? Like they'll get more grace if I'm actually praying to God and not to them.
So Exodus 90, a program like that. Some parts of it, people are going to see, your family's going to see bits of it. But, discerning how best to implement those things in conversation with your fraternity. Part of that conversation is, again, keeping it to yourself as much as you can, because it's not for other people. It's not for them to see. It's for you to do and offer up for them.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best way to handle where life clashes with one of the asceticisms, one of the disciplines, is to make a gentle exception or a change to it in order to keep it so it's only affecting you.
Actually, this last Exodus 90, it's been almost imperceptible that you're doing it. Like there are sometimes where I just totally forget that it's occurring. Another thing you've done recently too is like when we have guests over and their choice is like a hard beverage. But obviously you've given up alcohol with Exodus 90.
You're going to give away my secrets here.
It is. Like he'll put a couple of drops in.
Well, I put a little bit of cherry Coke Zero in and then a couple drops of, just
because again, that's for the person's hospitality.
Yeah,
nobody wants to feel like they're drinking alone, or they're not partaking in, you know what I mean? Like, and I, when he told me that several guests in, and I was just like, oh, I didn't even realize, totally forgot you weren't doing alcohol. That didn't even cross my mind, but it was just like, it made the other person feel
because my goal is to put that guest at their ease. I want to offer them that hospitality. And
Shoot, I shouldn't have given away your secret.
You're giving away my secret now.
You can't do it anymore.
Dang it. Well,
they'll
anyway.
always wonder. They'll always wonder if they're drinking alone. They're secret drinking alone.
Yeah. I don't know if we had any other points here. I guess the other main point that I was just making. This is I guess is more to the gentleman, and that this is just more advice about Exodus 90 in general, is that it has to be a surrender. It's so easy when we're trying to work on ourselves, work on our spiritual lives, physical lives, to get motivated, but then to lose hold of our trust in God, to try to double down on, I'm going to muscle my way through this. And then, the inevitable result is you get discouraged and you fail and you're just like, I can't do this. Well, the whole point was, no, in the first place, you couldn't do this. You can't do this spiritual life. You can't save yourself. You can't be a good man without God. And so you have to, at the same time as you're getting motivated to make some change or to take some big steps in your life or to pursue, an opportunity, an event like this, like Exodus 90, at the same time you have to, that's why prayer is the rock solid foundation of it. But even within that prayer, don't forget that in the prayer, you're anchoring yourself to God. That these things can't be you trying to seize greater control over your life. They have to be you surrendering more control over to God. And that's where the strength comes out. That's where the grace comes to be able to grow through these things.
And I guess if I'm thinking about speaking to women who will be going through this like for the first time or going through it now, the fruit of the male fraternity and the male accountability, and the small communal sacrifices that you don't see that they're doing, like daily workout or daily cold shower. I really think that they have over the last few years made a more robust head of the household. Like, I don't know how to describe it, because it's not like my husband is not like a towering, demanding man, head of the household, like a macho man. He really is Christ in our family every day. And I think that these asceticisms have just, they've really benefited his fatherhood and his head of the householdhood. I don't know. So I do think it's worth it. And I do think it is worth asking yourself those questions. Like, what am I afraid of? Like, is this reasonable? Is this something we need to talk about? Is this root fear something that I would like to get in the way of him growing in these ways? Or is this something that we just need to have a conversation about and maybe a fight about? Because I know sometimes we put things off because we just don't have the energy for a fight. But sometimes when we fight about things, or things finally come to the surface and we have like this big, long, hour-long discussion, and I usually say a lot of things I regret. I feel more energized after the fight, and you feel closer to the other person. And I don't know, like, life just gets better when you get those things. Oops, I'm hitting my microphone. If I get those things out of the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Let's wrap this up with a few thoughts here. Exodus 40 should be coming up soon. That's the Lenten version of this. And so if that's something you're interested in, check out exodus90.com, I think is the website for information about that program. Gentlemen, you need, you as a man, in a particular way, need challenge and accountability and encouragement from other men. That's just it's just how you're built. It's how God designed you. And so this is a great opportunity to get together with some guys, who want to be better husbands and fathers, and to undergo this journey together. So I'd encourage that. But even if you're not doing that, hey, it's Lent. And so this is a time when the church calls us to do some penance for our sins, which are many, in preparation for Easter. And so prayer, fasting, almsgiving, you should be thinking of those. You should be writing down something specific that you're doing. And you should be, again, going about whatever you pick up, prayer, fasting, almsgiving, going about those with the things we've talked about in mind. This is to be something that's between you and God. It should be for the purpose of winning the true treasure, which is greater intimacy with God, greater freedom, so that you can do His will in your life and the people that you're called to serve. But it takes prudence. It's never too late to begin. Whatever's come before this, you can jump in and pick up something. Let's see. But prudence is the main thing here. You make a plan and you run it, but you have to continue to discern as you go through it. You can have a great ideal, a great plan, but then life comes to hit you, and sometimes that's God reminding you that even with your plan, you can't try to assume all the control yourself. You have to continue to walk with God even through that plan. And so, yeah. Have a good Lent. We'll keep talking to you here. Prayer, fasting, almsgiving. Those are the watchwords. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Elevate Ordinary. Again, check out elevateordinary.com for more information about the show and our community, the Manor at St. Anne's. And download the Awaken app at theawakenapp.io. Again, thanks for joining us for this episode. God bless you. Talk to you again next time.